Hi, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Karen Support Podcast. As every week, we have great content for all of you in the healthcare industry. And today, we have a very special interview because we have a healthcare worker from all the way from British Columbia who's going to talk to us about his journey, his career, and his passions. So, with us here, we have Stu, who is a TikTok star and a healthcare assistant from BC. Hi, Stu. How are you?
Not too bad. How are you guys doing today?
We're great. We're so happy to have you, especially Kaylee here, because she really is a good fan of yours from TikTok.
I have a pretty sturdy following.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen that. I'm not on TikTok myself, but I do know that you are a superstar there. So it's so great to have you. Well,
Thank you.
so we can get started right away. And I just have one main question.
Hmm.
Tell us about yourself and your journey in healthcare.
Um, it's sort of roundabout. I wish I'd discovered my passion for it earlier in life. Prior to being an HCA, I was a cook for about 18 years. And it started off about 8 or 9 years ago. I started volunteering at a local long-term care facility in my town, and I just loved everything about it. I loved interacting with the residents. I was one of the only volunteers that went over onto the special care, like the lockdown dementia side of the building. And I just loved it. I loved spending time there. And it got to the point where I was going over to volunteer, for 4 days a week, 5 days a week. And finally, my wife actually pointed out, she's like, you could do this. You don't have to, you could do it all the time, not just, you know, on your weekends and time off. And I was like, okay, hold on, that's a good idea. Like, I just sort of thought it as a side thing. And I got my foot in the door in healthcare, actually in support services, working in food services and as a cook in the facility that I currently work in. Went over into housekeeping for the next year or so, and laundry and whatnot, and got into school. So I was working while I was going to school as an HCA, and just walked right into, once I was done school, I went straight into being an HCA. And I have never once looked back. It is the greatest. Like I said, I wish I'd found my calling for it, 20 years ago. But the way I put it to people is, when people talk about it, like, when people say they have to go to work, oh, I got to go to work today or whatever. I'm like, I get to go to work. I love I love being there. The last time I took holidays, and I was basically made to, they said, okay, take all your time off and don't show up. I made it 3 days before I found a reason to go in and do some paperwork and hang out with my residents, because they become like a family to you. And you just, if I'm away from there for 3 or 4 days, I miss my residents. I feel like I'm out of the loop. And yeah, I joke around with the residents that when I'm ready to retire, they'll have a room ready for me.
So one of the reasons we reached out to you was I saw the video on TikTok where someone posed a question about what's one thing you wish the general public knew about your specialty in healthcare, but they don't. And the response that you gave to that video, like your following and like the likes and stuff you on the video are massive. But the response that you gave was just so heartfelt and so heartwarming. And it just spoke to me about the misunderstandings about your particular job. Would you like to share with our listeners more about like what you had talked about on that TikTok video?
Yeah, I actually filmed that in my car outside of work after a shift. I had seen that. It was one of the stitch things you can do on TikTok, and that was the question. Yeah, the lady asked. She's like, what do you wish the general public knew? And I mean, I've had a number of people over time, and now, online and sometimes in real life, they say, oh, well, you change diapers for a living, you wipe bums for a living. There's a misconception of being an HCA is you sit there and, feed grandma applesauce, as it were. And the thing that I discovered is unless you have a family member in long-term care, there's a lot of people that don't realize what HCAs do and the amount of work and just emotional and physical energy it takes. And in my video, I talk about that. I'm like, people think we just, wipe bums. And it's like, no, I help your mom get dressed. I help your grandpa have a shave and feel clean. I help them roll over at night so they don't get bed sores. I basically, I should say, not me, we give them the ability to live as close to the life they had prior to needing help as we can, um, and making sure that they have that dignity. Um, and that's one of the things that I always sort of felt was people have a very narrow view of what we do. And unless you've been in the industry or worked in healthcare or have a family member, because that's the thing I had in the comment section was a lot of it was people saying, thank you, and you guys are, not all heroes wear capes. But the comments that really struck me on that video were the ones where, you know, thank you so much. My dad was in healthcare, or I mean, in long-term care. You guys, thank you for being there when we couldn't. And that's the thing is, I think people, for the most part, think that it's also a job. We go there, we show up to work, we help the people, we go home, and that's it. And it's like, no, most HCAs we're very emotional about our work, and the people that we're entrusted to care for. And we don't just leave it at work. We bring it home. Um, yeah, sorry, I sort of rambled on there a little bit, but
No, yeah, I get it. And do you consider yourself successful at this point? How long have you been doing this?
I have been full-time carried for 2 years now.
Okay.
I've been in long-term care for 4 years. Like I said, I'd volunteered before that, but
Mm-hmm. And in that,
um,
think that you're climbing the success ladder, and what lessons have you learned about how to succeed in this field?
you got to care about what you do. And it's not, like I said, it's not a job. The biggest thing is if you're a carrier or if you want to be a healthcare assistant, when you go into work, the people that you're caring for, they're not a job. They're not a list of tasks that need to be checked off by the end of your shift. They're people. And if you want to be respected both by your peers, your family, the families of the residents, your peers, the administration, is you can't look at it like a job. I mean, it is, but you can't. Within the sort of HCA scope, there's you can tell when within like a workplace, oh, those are the people that are task oriented, and those are the people that are resident oriented. And if you want to be successful and be respected, I would say you got to be resident oriented, people oriented. We're about taking care of people. We're not about completing a list of tasks.
So, with that said, like we are in the month where a lot of schools are letting out students, HCAs, PSWs, nurses, all different kinds of healthcare workers are coming into the field. So when it comes to being an HCA, what do you think the most important skills would be for those students to develop or to work on developing over their career?
I think when it comes to, I mean, HCAs have a pretty broad scope. I mean, in the sense of what you can do and where you can work. Everybody has their niche. It's the same with any section of healthcare. I have a couple of friends that are pediatric nurses that are just they're amazing human beings. They're amazing at their jobs. I could never do it. I couldn't work with peds or kids because the first sick kid I met would break my heart. I wouldn't be able to handle it. Whereas in long-term care, with I have my residents where they're sort of at the other end of the life journey, and for me, that's where I shine. So I think it's a matter of if you're going to be an HCA or a nurse or anything, is you want to pick the sort of area of healthcare where you're going to be most effective and where you can most emotionally handle it. Because we do deal with, I mean, when you're dealing in long-term care, especially, you're dealing with death. You're dealing with people passing away reasonably frequently. And, but some deaths are peaceful and some aren't. And you have to be able to handle both of those. So a lot of it's just making sure you're emotionally, you're emotionally prepared for what you're getting into. Beyond the tasks you prepare, the tasks that you do in getting people ready and helping them eat and cleaning and all that. It's you feel it every time you lose a resident. You feel it.
Yeah. And speaking of death, because a lot of people don't want to think about that, but it does affect healthcare workers. What other challenges are there in your work that affect you emotionally and in general? And what kind of strategies do you apply to overcome these challenges?
um well, like I said, I mean, you've got to be able to handle people passing away emotionally, and they're people that you can have cared for. I mean, I've had residents that I've cared for from the day I walked in, and then 2 years later that I cared for them for 2 years, and then they pass away, and it's tough. You got to be prepared for that. And not necessarily to compartmentalize and block it, but you got to be ready to handle those emotions. You've also got to be able to work with a large variety of people and personalities professionally. There's a vast scope of people that work in healthcare, and especially with HCAs. In just from gender to age range to ethnicity to where they came from. I mean, it's a huge um, swath of people, and you have to be able to work with all of them. And you might not like all of them. I mean, I'm generally a really easygoing, friendly, likable guy, but I've had coworkers that don't like me. Um, I know it's surprising to everybody, but but you've got to be able to put that aside and give the best care you can, even with people that you wouldn't get along with on the street necessarily, or you wouldn't have over for a hockey night. And you've also, the other thing that you've got to learn that they don't, you almost have to learn it on the job, is interacting with families. Um, you're, especially at end of life, you're interacting with families at one of the worst, you know, worst times in their lives. They're losing a loved one. And you have to be compassionate and caring and uh, empathetic, and you have to maintain that even if they're yelling at you and upset with you, because they may not understand the process of what happens when someone dies, or they may think their loved one's in more pain than they are, and they're going to take it out on you. And you have to be able to understand why they're you know treating you that way, absorb it, and give back kindness and give back compassion, because they're not doing it because they're mad at you. They're doing it because they're feeling a loss. They're losing somebody.
If there was one piece of advice that you could give, or recommendation that you could give to other HCAs or people looking to become an HCA, what would that piece of advice be?
Especially if you're going into long-term care. And I have sort of sort of an internal perspective on this, because just after I had graduated from school as an HCA, my dad was in a very serious car accident, and wound up breaking his back. and he's not, and was in, hospital and rehab for 6 months, and is now in a wheelchair, and has to have home care come in to their home twice a day to help him out in the mornings and that. But yeah, he has to have home care come in to help him in the mornings and in the evenings and that. And the biggest piece of advice I can tell you, and I thought this way beforehand, and I think of it even more now because of my father's situation, and I've seen some of the carries that do come into their home, is treat every single person you care for like family. And just in the back of your mind, always have, how would I want my mom treated? How would I want my dad treated? How would I want them cared for? And if you keep that in the back of your mind, whenever you interact or whenever you're caring for somebody, you're guaranteed success in especially in long-term care, because that's my specialty, but anywhere in healthcare. But just think of everyone that you meet as family, or how you would treat them as family.
Well said. That's really very beautiful, because at the end of the day, either one of our family members will end up in long-term care, or we will in the future. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's just like doing our part now so that we can benefit from that later, from that culture of generosity and kindness that should prevail in healthcare.
So something that you had mentioned when we had emailed back and forth with your picture was that you're known for your pink scrubs. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that for me.
I'm sort of known for my pink everything. I picked up it just turned into a calling card after all. Like I've got, um, it started off with like, I can't remember. I found a pink hoodie someplace in my size, and it just sort of went from there. And then I found pink scrubs online. And of course, I'm in a reasonably female dominated industry, being one of the 8 guys that work at my facility, being the one that wears pinks, stands out. And now I have, like, it's just sort of a calling card. I have pink scrub tops, I have pink scrub bottoms, I have pink compression socks, pink hoodies. I have on the back of my and my wife's vehicles, we have pink decals that say Scrub Life. And it just sort of, I mean, it works twofold. One, it's just sort of part of my personality. I mean, you see a 400-pound, 6'2", 400-pound man wearing pink scrubs or a pink hoodie, he's obviously secure. And what I found, especially in long-term care, is when with the residents, when names and things start to uh, evade, and their cognitive level declines, and they don't remember names, and they not necessarily remember faces that well, but they remember the big guy in pink.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you, I think we should probably add a question about how do you feel about being like plus size in the healthcare industry? Is that something you're comfortable talking about?
Oh, sure. It's like half the reason I think I got hired.
I just want to know
To
because
reach tall things and lift heavy things.
okay, good. I just want to know because patients usually have such a hard time in healthcare in general. Like when you're plus size, I know that I've gone through it, and I just want to know from like the healthcare worker perspective how that is.
Oh, it's actually a benefit. I mean, a lot of times, especially, it's kind of like being a guy. And again, tends to be a very female dominated. I don't want to say dominated, but the majority of healthcare aides and that are female. So when you have, I mean, on twofold, I mean, one, it's just nice to have tall people that can reach the top shelf. But what I have found actually with a lot of the residents, especially older women, is they kind of gravitate towards us. Like when you're being moved around if you're being moved around in a bed or boosted or lifted or anything like that, or helped in some way, there's a comfort level in knowing that here's a 6'2", 400-pound guy that can hold you and carry you. And like if we have to roll them to one side of the bed, I always like, that's what I tell them, like, don't worry, there's a 400-pound roadblock in front of you. You're not going anywhere.
Okay.
Which is comforting to them versus you know, a 5'2", 110-pound 20-year-old.
Right. Well,
So,
thank you so much to Stu for talking to us and just spending this time with us. I am really happy that somebody like you is part of the care and support community and the healthcare industry as a whole. And I really hope that you keep inspiring others to follow this path and just be the best version of themselves at work, because a lot of people, focus, on other aspects of their lives, but don't bring their best self to work, and you clearly do. So just thank you so much for that. And everybody listening to us, we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.
thank you.